a deeper dive into ageism. And the presentation is called From Ageism to Age Friendly, Changing the Framework to Become a More Age-Inclusive Society. And it's going to hopefully challenge you to reflect on what you're going to be dealing with and how to deal with it. I'm going to start my stopwatch, so I shall not hold you back from dinner. And hopefully at the end that it'll keep you engaged and reframing your views on aging and ageism as we go forward. So I do a little bit of reflective. How many of you have ever been asked your age? And at what point in your life were you asked? How about the question, how long are you planning to work? When are you going to retire? If you know somebody who slipped and fell in the winter on ice, would they have been asked, did you not sign up for a falls prevention class? How do you feel about those situations? And would you have the same feelings and thoughts if somebody asked you those questions when you were 30 or 40 or even 50? Slide 2 highlights why ageism matters and the fact that it creeps into our lives everywhere. It's in those funny birthday cards. I love them. I'm not going to send them out anymore after I wrote this presentation. It's in the media. It's in social media. It's in advertising. It's in the language we use. You know, people ask the question, you look, or state when they meet you, you look good for your age. So how do we feel about that? We kind of go, not quite sure how to answer that. I actually asked the person, I think you look good for your age too. If you're younger, you should see their facial expression. Ageism is also used to sometimes pit generations against each other, or equating youthfulness as a lack of wrinkles. I had to deal with a plastic surgeon recently who needed to remove a growth off my face, precancerous. His first comment, there's going to be a mark on your face. To which I said, can you make sure the mark fits in with my lifelines? And he looked at me and he said, oh, you mean your wrinkles? No, I want my lifelines. It shows that I've lived. And so somehow being equated as being older is a disadvantage versus somebody who is younger. So ageism is difficult for us to escape. The cosmetic business is the richest multi-billion-dollar industry because it endorses and encourages, supports ageism. There's creams to reduce the wrinkles, hair dyes to give you that certain youthful look. Plastic surgery is booming, and no one seems to be immune, even the 20-year-olds, from suggestions they need a little bit of Botox here and there, and dermatologists are peddling their wares of fillers and injectables. Those poor TV celebrities, their faces barely move at all. So what is showing in the literature and so on? We know that 50 to 80-year-olds report experiencing some form of ageism every single day. In fact, 93% of surveys around the world have those figures. And genders experience aging differently. Women, as I know as I'm getting older, have declared they're invisible as soon as they hit 70. If you watch the Netflix show, Frankie and Grace, they tackle the topic of older women and being invisible. They wanted to buy some cigarettes, and the younger person behind the counter just ignored them and served everybody else until finally the character, I think it's Frankie, reaches over, grabs the cigarettes and says, come on, Grace, we're leaving. Grace says, it's shoplifting. And she says, well, why would it be shoplifting? They never knew we were there to start with. So you have to start thinking about it in those terms. Even the world's older leaders are not immune from ageist comments. Do we all remember when President Joe Biden fell off his bicycle? The world gasped. Why? Because he's an age of a group he represents. And it's assumed he fell off the bike because it's age related. When a person who's younger falls off a bike, we think nothing of it. So I want to give you a minute to start thinking in terms of how you feel on aging yourself. Close your eyes. Think of where you are in life today, 10 years from now. Who are you? What are your activities like? Where do you live? Who are the people you associate with? Are they older? Are they younger? Is there family in your life? Do you live in the same community? What kind of foods are you going to eat? How are you going to dress? So if I look at my decade, I'm going to think my next decade out and look at the same questions. I'm 75 to 85. How will I live? Am I in a retirement home? Am I in a community? What community? Are the same people that I saw in my mind's eye 65 to 75? Are they the same people when I'm in 75 to 85? What's my health like? Did I give up dyeing my hair? Did I jump out of an airplane? Am I hanging more with younger people or older people? Or is my age range diverse? Play that little scenario a couple of times after today and think about how your life, imagine what your life is out 10 years out from now and 10 years out further. See how far beyond 90 you can see to carry you forward. So ageism affects and age how we think and feel and act towards others. It also imposes very powerful barriers to the development of good policies and programs for older and younger people. It has profound negative consequences on our health because we get negative reinforcements of what an older person, an old person, a frail elderly person should it be like, act like. As one of the models, Polina Poroskova, commented, people are criticizing she's wearing a bikini in her 60s. And they're saying, oh my God, that's so sexist. But she says at 16, nobody cared. It's the same person. They're just a few decades apart. We need to think about our attitudes and the messages that we send to people. Even in the smallest ways of the words we use have a great impact. And just as the last presenter said, we stand up for ourselves. We must demand that we are treated respectfully. And if something isn't appropriate, we put up our hands and we go, no means no. That person has to change, not us. Ageism, for example, did you know, question on ageism, that no student in healthcare studies is ever exposed during their academic life to real life older people? They intern only in long-term care homes, complex care homes, where older people may be in end-of-life stages or extremely serious mobility issues, advanced cognitive impairment. How would they know what the needs of an older person is who lives in community? At this point in my life, when I see a physician, they go, you're not taking medications? Wow. Wow. Instead of it, medications apparently are the norm. They don't really know about chronic care needs. They don't receive training on how to speak or interact with an aging population. And on top of that, for ageism, if you add another complexity to the equation, you have a foreign last name. Mine is Nikarovich, and it's unpronounceable. You have a funny accent because you're an immigrant. My God, you should have a different skin tone. And the older person is guaranteed to be dismissed. I could share an example with my mother, sick. I drove her to hospital. She has a kerchief on. She looks like a babushka. Eastern European is my roots. Who did the physician talk to in hospital? Not the capable person, my mother, who had the funny accent. They spoke to me so I could translate. My mother said, from what, English? You have to think about this. A friend of mine, I was assigned and took on the role temporary of power of care for health and finance. She was at Sunnybrook Hospital. They sent her to St. John's Rehab Center. And they mistook her stroke. She calls me. I said, you're slurring words. This is not you. What is going on? Did they give you medication? No. She describes her symptoms. I said, get off the phone. You're having a stroke. I call the front desk and say she's having a stroke. You know what they said to me? They said, oh, we just assumed she had an accent. Why would you assume? I'm thinking as a woman is having a stroke, has an accent because she's brown skin toned. And I said, really? If she has an accent and it's not from Quebec, because she was born in Montreal, then she's having a stroke, deal with it. If I hadn't intervened with that bias, she would have died. Sorry, these are true stories. That's called ageism. People, as they get older in long-term care homes, retirement communities, are infantilized. That means you're being deared to death. Hi, dear, how are you? You don't have a name anymore. You have antlers. You're a deer. If you're upset, they rub your backs. I know, I ran retirement homes. I know, my husband ran long-term care homes. It's removes the dignity and respect of the person as an individual. If you don't hear well, people shout. It can create intimidating behaviors that have negative consequence. And if you talk in terms of elder abuse, it's because the older person doesn't have to be respected, doesn't have value, so I can take away from you. You are now vulnerable. I can have a scam if I'm 25. I can have a scam if I'm 75. But the children will tell their parent, oh my God, you were scammed. You need to move into a safe place, long-term care home, retirement home. You're not living safely in community. But it has nothing to do with it. I often hear people say that they're going to fight old age all the way. That's the reason they're not going to use a cane. A cane is a mobility device. It's no different than me wearing glasses. But people interpret that disability that's acquired and treat you differently. And hence, it makes ageism perpetuate. So, slide number 4. We're going to go through. We'll send the slides out. These can be shared because it just gives some statistics about aging. If we can go to the next slide, please. Attitudes are very complex. What can we do? People think differently towards age. Everybody has a stake in changing it. And OSCO is very much involved in the age-friendly movement across Ontario. We started in 2007. And what is age-friendly communities? So age-friendly communities are basically campaigns at the local level that will shift attitudes to aging and challenge ageism everywhere. Aging is a normal part of life. You were born, you became 3, you advanced to 15, 21, 39, 50, and bless you for continuing on life's journey. It's a good thing. According to the Center for Better Aging, attitudes towards aging can create worrying consequence for both physical and mental health. Older people may be overprescribed medications instead of taking therapies. During COVID-19, attempts to limit life-saving resources were not made available to older people, such as resuscitation. Without consultation, some people did not make it through. Assumptions also exist that older workers are less capable or less able of learning new skills that lead people to being forced out of the workplace. And our own understanding of the age process is very relative as to how we proceed. The age-friendly framework was created by the World Health Organization in 2007 to combat ageism. What happens is it was a consultation with people. It is built on evidence of what is necessary to support healthy and active aging in place. OSCO was involved from 2009 to 2010 in gathering feedback across Ontario and in cafe conversation styles. The outcome was one of the pillars that the Ministry for Seniors and Accessibility currently uses. However, the age-friendly movement in Ontario is still primarily based on the volunteer sector. I think I've got one more slide. Yes, no, yes. So who's responsible to deal with this? Government funding is limited. What will this age-friendly community look like? An age-friendly community makes sure that people of all ages and all abilities live healthy and active lives. These are communities and places that make it possible for people to continue to stay in their home, whatever home they choose to stay in. They can participate in the activities they value, and they're deemed to be able to contribute to their communities and are encouraged to for as long as possible. Communities across Ontario are in different stages of evolution of this age-friendly framework. Every community is different because it reflects them. And they're very specific to the needs of the people who are out there. Those were developed through consultations and feedback sessions. After consultation, a formal plan is developed and adopted with a commitment by the municipality to implement it. You'll find the processes outlined on the province's website, outlining how to create and make Ontario a more age-inclusive workplace. But when you go to the community for feedback around the world, the majority of people believe that governments should be more involved in supporting aging, and that includes the age-friendly communities. We need to look at different ways of aging and the demographic change to support this so that we have the maximum potential in society to enjoy our lives. So I ask people to think about, let's reframe the image of aging and change the message. Aging shouldn't be characterized as a negative process of physical or cognitive decline and loss. We shouldn't say it's inevitable that we become unable to function in society. Let's move away from the commonly associated thoughts of vulnerability and dependency as an older person to leading that of a destination beyond being old and making it a continuous, lifelong process. In the workplace today, more than 25% of Ontarians are over the age of 50. That's a big ratio. But on the other hand, this is the only time in history we have 6 generations of workers working together. So we have that opportunity to bridge the link between the younger worker, the older worker, to help break down that bias of what older and younger people see amongst each other. Many people over the age of 50 provide unpaid care for loved ones. And in retirement living, we need to acknowledge that many older people volunteer and help in their communities, providing millions of dollars of unpaid resources, but extremely valuable resources to us. These people who are older all lead rich, productive, contributory lives. We need to remind people, including your local member of provincial parliament and member of parliament, as well as government workers, that older people are not bed blockers. They're not a burden to society or the cause of a broken healthcare system. Most of our lives, we've lived independently. The majority of us will start to draw down those, quote, valuable resources as we start entering end of life. In fact, 90% of the people over the age of 65 live in mainstream, ordinary housing, not care homes or retirement communities or other images for complex care. So what is the outcome of an age-friendly community? It basically says the message. What is good for the older person is good for community. Think about it for a minute. I'm an older person who acquired vision loss, maybe due to macular degeneration. So doesn't a crosswalk make sense with sound for me? But what if that person was born with a visual impairment or low-level vision? They would benefit as well. How about the timing at the crosswalk? My arthritis doesn't allow me to cross the road as quickly with my cane. But if I'm a child who lost a leg, wouldn't a longer crossing time help them as well? I must confess, I'm height challenged. I'm under 5'5". And now I'm even more challenged as I'm gotten older with arthritis. So reaching the top of the shelf in the grocery store for that elusive cereal is not a good idea. And finding somebody is twice the challenge. So think about it from an economic perspective. If I can't reach that cereal box, I can't buy it. And who misses out on that transaction? My mother was partially deaf. And I had an aunt in whose house everybody was signing. So why don't we teach older people who acquire hearing impairment how to lip read. If they can't afford a hearing device, this may be helpful. For those who are not comfortable about using those hearing devices, when we have a meeting like today, we can also use a transcription on Zoom so they don't have to declare a disability. There are other disabilities that we don't know about as we age, and people start to declare them. I have an invisible disability. Many people do. But we talk about now as we get older about all of that. And wow, doesn't that make us feel inclusive when we can talk about what does it feel like when we're getting old and how we deal with those comments that disrespect us, that want to take away the dignity and control from our beings. However we are, whoever we are, an age inclusive society welcoming people is the best way to live. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. That was fantastic.